Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening to talk about how to meet with your congressional representative about solar. I'm really excited to be joined today by my colleague and Vice President of Policy and Advocacy at Solar United Neighbors, Glenn Brand. Without that, we'll get going. So my name is Sarah Solomon. I'm the Director of Community Impact here at Sun. I use she, her pronouns. And as I mentioned, I'm joined here by my colleague, Glenn. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Um, Good evening to everybody. My name is Glenn Brand. I'm the Vice President of Policy and Advocacy for Solar United Neighbors, and it's my job to help solar homeowners be effective advocates for solar policy. So I am super excited to talk about um, a subject to folks who are kind of our kind of people, who really want to uh, make a strong effort to make their voice heard in Congress in this particular case. And I might say one thing here, the skills we're talking about and talking to your federal representatives are completely transferable to meeting with your state representatives. And so keep that in mind, or your mayor or city councilors. So keep that in mind. I think you'll find these pretty useful and practical hints. So I'd like to just start off by just giving the bigger context. Our theory of change, which is a fancy way of saying how we go about our work, is to help people go solar. We run solar co-ops. Many of you may have gone solar through our solar co-ops, or you got information from Solar United Neighbors to help you go solar. And then we bring people together in a variety of ways. And the way that I work on it in particular is to help people and to join in for a fight for our energy rights. Next slide. Um, so I think it's really important to understand that solar homeowners are a particular constituency that we have found to be very, very effective advocates for solar. And it's because of your stories, right? You know what you're talking about. You went through the process of investing your own money into putting a rooftop solar system or becoming a subscriber to a community solar project. And you know what the benefits are to your community, your household, your business. And that's why we want to make sure that we emphasize, and I'll say it a few times tonight, you bring your story to this. And that's really what's going to make an impact. Next slide, please. So there are levels of citizen lobbying. This is our pyramid of engagement. And you'll recognize that if you're on this call, you have taken a mass online action, sometimes called clicktivism, or you send an email, you get an action alert from Sun or an action alert from other groups that you support. And they'll say, take this action, it's important, send a message to your decision maker. And so that's clicktivism. And I would not say that it's unimportant. In fact, I do think it's important, but it's not as impactful as the ones as you climb up this ladder of engagement. If we want to make a greater impact, you're going to take the steps toward the top. A personalized email or letter is better than a mass email that decision makers get all the time. And it's very clear what a personalized email or letter looks like. And that's why we really encourage you when you do get an ask from Sun or other groups to take an action, to click, they all allow you to customize it and to add a personal sentence or two to that. I know it takes a few more minutes, but it makes it more impactful. They'll select it, they'll look at it. Personal phone calls. Now we're in the range where not that many people do it. And I would say the fewer people who do it, the more impactful it is. That might be a little counterintuitive, but I think that's the case. A personal phone call, very few people call up, relatively speaking, the office of a decision maker and say, look, it's important, this issue is important to me, I'd like you to take this position. Be aware that the people answering the phone for, let's say in this case, your congressperson, they are required to take notes, who called, what they wanted, and so forth. So it gets recorded, and one call may not mean much, but a lot of people do personal phone calls they pay attention. Now we're talking about the next three ones are in person. You attend a lobbying event. Let's say there's a state house lobbying event in your state. And if you take the time to come to the state house for a lobbying event, that is very impactful. The next level would be the testimony at a state legislative hearing or a federal legislative hearing, if you ever have that opportunity. And that shows the decision maker that you've taken time out of your life, that this issue is so important that you've taken the time to compose your thoughts and to articulate why it's important and that you should take the action that you advocate for. And then finally, at the top of the pyramid, and thing we're going to talk about tonight, is the in-person meeting. Very few people take the time to meet with their congressional reps. I think that the step you're thinking about taking now, I hope you're committed to doing, is you should know that your time is well spent. And I don't want to exaggerate that, you're meeting with your Congress people, they're going to change their mind. That's not how this works. But it really does make an impression. And it could do that. In fact, there's many, many anecdotes that in-person meetings made a difference. So next slide, please. So what influences representatives? So according to the representatives themselves, they say in-person visits is the most impactful. 94% say this. This is a study that was done not too long ago. Individualized emails, 92%. Individualized letters, you get the idea. And then the last one, we didn't mention it before, but writing a letter to the editor and publishing it is important. It's as important as an individualized letter, according to this number. And that's because state representatives and federal representatives track letters to the editor, and they see them as representative of a lot of people. And so they really pay attention. One of the jobs of a staffer is to look at the morning newspapers, the afternoon newspapers, not that anybody looks at a piece of paper anymore, but online, and they track who's writing, particularly if their boss has been mentioned in the letter. So super impactful. We actually have a guide to helping people write good, effective letters to the editor, and we'll send that to you in a follow-up. Representatives want to know. They want to know why you're there. Why are you taking the time? Why do you care about this issue? 90%. They also want to know what you want, right? They just don't want to meet, right? They want to meet a little, but they really want to know what it is you're asking of them. And then you see closely behind that, and I mentioned this before, they want to know what your personal story is, what brings you to be so motivated to take this step that so few people do. So next slide, please. Okay, we are arranging in-district meetings with your Congressional House representative. So one thing to know that reps get pulled away all the time. So you may meet with a staffer instead of the actual rep. And that can be a little disappointing to a lot of people because they think, I'm here to meet with the right person. But I can tell you that meeting with staff is very impactful, depending on the representative, even more so. Many reps, believe it or not, don't know all that much about a lot of issues. And so they really depend on staff to inform and shape their views. And so that's important. And also, it's an expectation of a staffer to summarize the meeting of constituent meetings and share those. Those get shared frequently. So just wanted to put that out there because sometimes you think you have a meeting with a rep, and then you're greeted and they'll say, I'm so sorry, the rep got pulled away for a vote or whatnot. So keep that in mind. Next slide, please. Okay. So every effective meeting has very specific and articulated goals. And so here are the ones that we're suggesting for your meetings. The first, as I'll say again, is to convey your personal story. Why your solar investment was a smart idea for you. What are the specific benefits to your household, community, and business? Specifics are the most memorable. That's the thing. Just saying I support solar because it's good for our country is not a memorable sentence. But It helped going solar helped my business because I have saved money that now I can redirect into my business, hire more people, and reinvest into my business. That's better. And the more specific, even more than what I just said, is even more memorable. I think it's important for all these meetings is that we want to demonstrate that solar is a nonpartisan issue, right? I know, we live in a world where everything is seemingly super partisan, but the reality is that solar enjoys broad support across party lines. Um, and so we need to make sure we reinforce that notion by saying with your actions that solar is popular, right? It's popular. It's safe for a representative to take a pro-solar position because constituents care about it. Another goal here, and this is assuming you're in it for somewhat of the long haul, is you want to build an ongoing constituent representative relationship for future communications. That doesn't necessarily you're going to meet frequently or do that again. But after you meet, and then when you contact them when an issue comes up, you can reference in your letter that you've met previously. And you could talk about what happened in that meeting and why you're enthusiastic about connecting with the representative. And again, very few people do this, relatively speaking. Sure, there are lawyers and lobbyists who do it, but constituents, there are very few people. And so you stand out when you take this action, and it really does help over time to build that relationship. And then finally, there's an ask for every meeting, and we're suggesting that the ask be a rather easy ask in my mind. And you ask them directly to join the bipartisan House Solar Caucus. And the next slide will talk a little more about what that is. Next slide. Okay, so you probably haven't heard of it, but unless you heard about it from Solar United Neighbors, but there is a Congressional House Solar Caucus, and a caucus is simply an organized gathering, a forum, so to speak, of representatives who want to get together and talk about specific issues. And there are all kinds of caucuses. Some of them are on energy issues, but until recently, there really never was one focused just on solar. There are ones on clean energy or energy, but that really stands out. And that's where we want to connect and grow that support among Congress for distributed solar, for rooftop and community solar. This particular one is chaired by Representative Krishna Murthy, who's a Democrat from Illinois, and also Representative Ralph Norman, a Republican from North Carolina. So there's always two co-chairs, bipartisan, so there's one Democrat, one Republican. This caucus has 24 members, and it's not perfectly evenly divided, which is what we would like to see. But right now it's 18 Democrats and 6 Republicans. And actually, in today's partisan world, that's pretty good, believe it or not. And here's a list in case you are represented by one of these representatives. You should know that whether or not they belong to the House Solar Caucus. So they're the Republicans at the top, and they're the Democrats at the bottom. Next slide, please. We have connected with the Congressional House Solar Caucus and are really trying to support what we can. We recently, it was just in April, we organized a briefing about the benefits of rooftop community solar, and we are planning another one. So there's an ongoing relationship. And before we see a little video about that event, I wanted to tell you that when you ask them to join the bipartisans, and I insist that you always say bipartisan every time you say it, bipartisan Congressional House Solar Caucus, the way to do that is they just connect with the offices of the co-chairs, Representative Krishna Murthy or Representative Norman. So next slide.
And Glenn, did you want to show the video as well?
Yeah, this would be great.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah,
great.
so this is a little video we put together to illustrate the reality of the House Caucus and the interests that exist among Congress on our issues.
Yeah. All right, and forgive me, folks, I'm just gonna try to get this going really quickly. Let's see here. Okay, are you able to see my screen? Great.
Yes. Can't hear the sound yet, though.
Hmm, okay. That's interesting.
Well, we may have to cut this part.
Okay. I will send this to everyone.
Yeah, that might be nice.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and send this to
Okay.
everyone who's
Okay.
registered for the event.
Okay. So then I'll just resume as if I never said anything about the video.
Okay. All right, back to you. I guess
Great.
slide.
Next slide. All
Oops.
right. So what to say at the meeting? All right. A lot of this is common sense. The first thing is these are what I would regard as semi-formal meetings, right? It's not overly formal, but we definitely want to be acting in a professional manner. So the first thing you do in a meeting like this, of course, is express your gratitude for the meeting, right? So they're taking time out of their schedule to do this, and they deserve some gratitude. It's important to introduce yourself as a constituent, right? The reason why you got the meeting and why they're interested in talking to you is they're interested in what voters have to say. They're constituents. Their job is to represent your district, and you need to make sure you say where you live, that you're in the district, and what you do. And you could say something else, but basically the town you live in and your occupation is probably good enough. Um, at some point, and this is arbitrary in the beginning of the meeting, you can pass out a solar fact sheet that Sun has put together for your state. And that's not something you'll look at. You just tell them, we thought you might find this useful down the road, and has statistics about why solar's good for the state and the district. And then I think you should say, we're here, and explain the meeting goals. We're here because we wanted to convey our personal solar success stories to you and talk to you about why it's been good for us. And then you'll give specifics of that. I would really appreciate if you did take advantage of the federal solar investment tax credit, the 30% tax credit that most people who invest in rooftop solar take. I certainly hope everyone has taken advantage of it. You should say that was an important factor for you going solar. They should hear that. When I say specific benefits, I think you should talk about, look, I reduced my bill by 80% before going solar. I have been in meetings where people take out a before and after. They hold them up, bills, electric bills, and they say, look, I was paying this amount of money, I was paying this amount of money. And then you can talk about the other issues of why, besides the economic benefits. But being specific is what they're going to remember. And then you want to make your ask. And the ask is simple. Please join the Bipartisan House Solar Caucus. And you might have to say a little about what it is. And but that's all you really have to say. So pretty simple, right? So next. So a little more about the meeting. So I'm just going to keep saying it. Your personal story is going to make a greater impact than presenting some list of facts or some fancy argument. You want to be as concise as possible, right? These meetings aren't that long. Sometimes they're 30 minutes, sometimes they're an hour, sometimes they're 20 minutes. And so you'll know ahead before then, but you want to be very concise and specific. You also want to do something that's hard to do for a lot of us. It's hard for me in a meeting, with one of these people. You got this meeting, you have a lot of stuff you want to say, and you end up filling up all the space with your talking and or in my case, in my talking, and then you don't allow any space for the legislator or the staff to respond or ask questions. And you really want to have a couple of those awkward pauses where they say something. Or if you need to, you could say, you can ask them a specific question, right? To engage them. But they're going to want to go back and forth. They're not going to just sit there for the most part. But if you're going to talk a lot and you never give them a space, they may just take notes and say, thanks for meeting with you. And that, you want to learn more information from them. And so allow that space for legislators. It's really it's a little bit of an art, but a little awkward pause will generally do it. They may ask you a question that you don't know the answer to. I mean, obviously, if they ask you about your solar investment and how your battery in your basement that's charged by your solar system, you can answer all those questions. But if you don't know the answer to a question, don't fake it. Just say, I don't know the answer to that question, but I'll be glad to find out the answer and send it to you later. They'll respect that. And it gives you an opportunity to restate your ask in the follow-up. So that's really important. And you ask us for help, we'll help you get the answer to that question. And it may be, well, how many jobs do solar businesses in our state employ, right? And we can get that data, but that's important. By the way, if you used a local solar installer, somebody in the district, certainly in the state, you should mention that, right? The local business that you supported, and that's part of the benefits of solar. So next slide, please. Okay, and you should have a formal wrapping up closing. Again, semi-formal, close the meeting by thanking for the opportunity to meet and say to them, we will send a follow-up email. And if it's, to answer your question or whatnot. Also, if you're comfortable doing this is not required, but it's fun and I think important to share. Ask them if it's okay to take a picture at the end with the representative and or the staffer, and ask them and say, we'd like to post it on social media. And they'll say, oh, we don't feel comfortable, but they all love that. They want to be promoted on social media for the most part. And if they say yes, take a picture, something similar to the one that you see here, that shows that you all gathered together and talked, and send those photos to us, and we'll share on our social media accounts, and we'll tag the representative. And if you want, we'll tag you. But it's a really nice thing to end a meeting, everybody's smiling in front of a little camera, a phone, yeah. So the next one. Okay, here's just a few more tips. Sometimes, and this probably won't happen with the ask in question, but sometimes the representative will say no, they won't give us the answer that we want. They'll oppose something that we want them to support or vice versa. And so in general, don't get angry. It doesn't really, I mean, you could feel angry, but don't express anger. Express polite disappointment. Say, oh, I'm really sorry to hear that, right? That's too bad. I'm disappointed. And then you ask them a very productive question that has served us very well over the time. You ask them what information they would need to reconsider their position. Say, well, what would you need to change your position on this bill or to join the caucus? And they'll say something like, well, I really need to see some more economic data, or I'll need to see, whatever it is. And that then begins to be an argument down the road. And we can help marshal that information, and you can get that information to them. Again, it's probably, they won't say this for our ask for this particular meeting that we're suggesting to join the bipartisan House Solar Caucus. They'll probably say, oh, we'll look into it. But keep that in mind. We really want to have a productive, trusting relationship, which also would, involves polite disagreement, right? If your representative says, oh, I'm so glad you mentioned this to me, I will be joining the caucus, this is a great thing, you just say, thank you so much for committing to do this. You try to lock them into something. And then as soon as they say they support your position, you make a stronger ask. And in this case, it would be, that's great. I hope you'll consider asking your colleagues and the rest of our state delegation to join in at the caucus. So always elevate the ask if they say yes, and that they'll appreciate that. All right, next slide, please. Okay, the meeting's over. Then in the next day or two, whenever you can get to it, but don't wait too long. Send a very short email, concise email to the representative's office. Of course, you say, "Dear Representative such and such, thank you for taking the time to meet with us, etc. Here's the information you requested about solar jobs in our state." And then you repeat your ask again to close the letter. So you would say, and I hope you'll, seriously consider joining the Bipartisan House Solar Caucus. And you can do that by just contacting one of the co-chairs' offices. Sincerely. And that's a good follow-up. So in summary, here are the key takeaways for this training. You want to be prepared what you want to say. And so that's important to have in mind what the meeting goals are, right? Because that's really what you want. That's your outline of what you're saying. Emphasize your personal story. Get good at talking about your personal story. And again, judicious use of details is great and memorable. It doesn't have to be gimmicky, like I mentioned, like holding up the two before and after bills. That's not a bad idea. But you really want to talk about it and make it clear that you're a real person. You are in the district, you live there, you're engaging with your neighbors. Um, and, I've been in meetings where people say, all my neighbors are curious about my solar install. And I often give people a little tour of my solar install. And when I tell them how much money I've saved and what the rate of return is, 7 years or whatever, they're pretty excited. Finally, the last two steps are to have a clear ask, always to have an ask, and then the professional follow-up. And that's it. Next slide. We're not abandoning you there. We're here to support you in doing this. So there's a couple ways that you can connect with us. You can connect with the advocacy department that I lead by sending an email email to advocacy@solarunitedneighbors.org. That's probably the best way to do this. And we're here to help you. So I just can't thank you enough, even to take the time to listen to this. Shows that you're really committed to making positive change. And we hope this serves you well. And thanks again.
Yeah. Thank you everyone so much for taking the time out of your evening to be here today. Thank you, Glenn, for sharing all of your knowledge, all of your experience with everyone. I guess I'll just kind of leave with one final note for you. These representatives are people, and they're just like you and me. They have a job, and your job, I guess, is to kind of help them understand what's important to you, so their job can be a little bit easier and a little bit more driven by the voices of the community. So deep
Well,
breaths. Yeah, thank you. So deep breaths, everyone. Thank you so much for being an active participant in your democracy, and good luck in your constituent meetings.